here is part 3 of my NFL theory on if Brett Farve stayed with the Falcons. In the last episode I covered the years of 1997 to 2001. This part is going to be the years of 2002 to 2006. So, let's continue on. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if? An NFL theory. So when we last left off, we're going into 2002, and the Falcons have recovered for a few years of struggle and got back to the playoffs, and now they're looking like to make a run for it at maybe a possible Super Bowl since they still have yet to do it with Favre. The Packers now have Chad Pennington, and remember, this is going to be his first year going in. Actually, we get to see his stats, so we'll get to actually see if he worked out better than Favre. And then the Jets, of course, since the Falcons didn't need him, they have Michael Vick now, and we're going to see how he does really in his first full season there. So, let's get into the theory itself. So we start off in 2002 with the Falcons. Favre, he plays good. Statistically maybe better than Vick, although I think he threw more interceptions. But despite the improvement, he doesn't rush as well. That's going to hurt as well. But in the end, despite that, the Falcons actually regress, finishing 9-6-1, which is the exact same record they had in real life, 2002. Meanwhile, for the Packers, Chad Pennington finally gets his actual first season start, so we get to actually see what his stats are, and he had his incredible season, and the Packers improve to 12-4 and look pretty scary going into the playoffs. Meanwhile, for the Jets with Vick, he has his good season, but statistically he wasn't as good as Pennington. But he does have the rushing yards and touchdowns to save him, though, and that helps. Unfortunately, the Jets regressed to 9-7, but that's still enough to get into the playoffs. So in the updated 2002 playoff stands, the Jets have the number 1 seed, the Steelers move up to the number 2 seed, the Raiders fall down to the 3rd seed, and the Broncos get as the 6th seed. And in the NFC, the Packers move up to the 2nd seed, the 49ers move up to the 3rd seed, the Buccaneers fall to the 4th seed, and the Saints make the playoffs as the 5th seed, and the Giants fall all the way down to the 6th seed. So we're going to put our main focus in the look at Chad Pennington and the Packers. In the divisional round, they would host the 49ers. Now, Pennington, of course, did not play good in the divisional round in real life when the Jets visited the Raiders. But neither did the 49ers. They both played really bad. So this will probably be a defensive slugfest. But with the Packers having the better defense, I think they would get the win, which sets them up in the conference championship now as they visit the Eagles. And just like in real life, remember, the Buccaneers won that game in a defensive struggle as they destroyed the Eagles' offense. The Packers have the defense do it, and now Chad Pennington, of course, this is a game he didn't play in, so I can go based upon his stats and just average that out. So I think the Packers would win it to make their first Super Bowl appearance since 1997. So Super Bowl 37 would now be them hosting the Titans. Thanks to the Raiders getting the lower seed, the Titans make the Super Bowl instead. So the Super Bowl, the Titans and the Packers, it would be an interesting game, but looking at their stats, I think the Packers would get it and get their 2nd Super Bowl in this theory without Favre. So now we head into 2003. So of course, Favre with the Falcons. Remember in real life, the Falcons were terrible because Vick had his near season-ending injury. But thankfully, Favre is here the entire season, so that's going to help him out. Although he didn't play as good, I think, compared to 2002. And I'm sure the Falcons themselves weren't as good with Vick gone, so that could hurt them too. But despite that, the Falcons improve to go to 10-6. Meanwhile, for the Packers, they're not doing so well with Pennington right now. He's nowhere near as good as he was in 2002. Injuries and a Super Bowl hangover really affected the Packers, but despite that, they regressed, but they finished 10-6, which is the exact record they had in real life in 2003. Meanwhile, the Jets, after all the expectations they got, just like the Falcons going into 2003, that completely disappeared once Vick suffered his near season-ending injury, as the Jets bomb out all the way to 5-11. So in the updated 2003 standings, the Chiefs move up to the 3rd seed as the Colts fall down to the 5th seed. And in the NFC, the Rams now got the number 1 seed as the Falcons move all the way up to the 2nd seed and make the playoffs. Cowboys move up to the 3rd seed. And the Packers stay the same. The Panthers fall all the way down to the 5th seed, and the Seahawks fall to the 6th seed. So the primary focus is going to be on the Falcons and Favre, as they got the bye in the divisional round. They'll host their division rival, the Panthers. Now remember, in real life, the Panthers in this game, they would visit the Rams, and they won in double overtime. And in that game, they pretty much shut down the Rams offensively until like the 4th quarter, when all of a sudden the Rams had to make a giant comeback to tie it up and send it to overtime. Now, the Panthers, statistically, even with Favre on the Falcons, are probably better than the Falcons. But the big problem for them is the reason why they were able to win is because they had all those turnovers on the Rams. Now, of course, Favre did have the interception against the Eagles, remember, in the division round the next day. But, of course, it has to go to overtime for that to even happen. And outside of that, Favre did not have an interception or a turnover at all that I know of in that game. And of course, the Falcons, we know of, didn't have a turnover whatsoever because they didn't play in the playoffs. So without those turnovers, that's going to come back to bite the Panthers, as the Falcons are going to get the victory to move on to the NFC Championship. Thanks to the easy opponents, they host the Seahawks now in the NFC Championship. This would be an offensive game. Unfortunately, though, the Seahawks were the better team overall, so I think they would hold on to get the win to get their first Super Bowl appearance, as the Falcons are shit out of luck once again. So the Super Bowl 38 matchup would now be the Chiefs and the Seahawks, as I think the Chiefs in this scenario would beat the Patriots. Now they don't have to worry about the Colts in the divisional round, as this would probably be an offensive showcase. But of course, the Chiefs had the number 1 offense in the league, number 1 rushing offense, and passing too, pretty much. I think this would be easily a Chiefs victory, as they get their first title in over 30 years. So now we go into 2004's NFL Draft. Now, of course, remember in real life, the Chargers had the number 1 overall pick. They wanted Eli, and he didn't want to play with them, and that led to a massive set of trades that really set up the entire league, with Eli going to the Giants, Phillip Rivers going to the Chargers, and Big Ben going to the Steelers. But as I covered before, a lot of stuff would be different depending on the outcome in this scenario of who got the picks. And going into 2004 in this timeline, the Giants now have the number 1 pick. So instead of going for Eli like they wanted, they're going to go for the quarterback they actually wanted, which was Big Ben. And because of that, the Chargers still get Eli, since they're not going to do the trade. And as I said before, I think Eli would just suck it up and deal with it, especially since Breeze is going to be there for the next 2 years, so they could just bench him for Root meanwhile. And meanwhile, the Steelers will get the quarterback that they wanted, Phillip Rivers. So that's how it is as we head now into 2004. So after all the massive carousel changes for quarterbacks from the draft, we go into 2004 as Favre and the Falcons. Favre plays a lot better than Vic, I think, overall, especially with more touchdowns. Without the rush attack, though, that hurts. But the Falcons improve to go 11-5, which is the exact same record they had in real life 2004. Meanwhile, the Packers with Pennington, he plays better and he doesn't get injured like he did in 2003, but they're still not as good as they were beforehand. And the Packers once again regress as they fall down to 8-8. Meanwhile, the Jets with Vic, although he plays well, he's just not, the team's just not the same without Pennington, as the Jets only improved to 6-10, which is quite surprising. Now for our 2004 rookies, Big Ben with the Giants, he would take over when they were 5-4. However, although he would play good, the Giants would largely get spanked in all those games as they only improved to 6-10. But meanwhile, Phillip Rivers with the Steelers would play very well, and thanks to that number 1 defense too, the Steelers have a massive improvement as they go 15-1 just like they did in real life. So in the updated 2004 standings, in the AFC, the Colts fall down to the 4th seed, the Chargers move up to the 3rd seed, the Broncos move up to the 5th seed, and the Bills make the playoffs as the 6th seed. Meanwhile, in the NFC, the Vikings move up to the 3rd seed, and the Packers fall down to the 5th seed, and the Panthers make the playoffs as the 6th seed. So once again, the focus is on Favre as the Falcons host the Vikings in the divisional round. And remember, the Falcons crushed the Rams the previous week. The Vikings kind of had their struggles too, although Culpepper has a good year. The Vikings, though, remember, did not play well against the Eagles. And combined with their struggle with how much the Falcons dominated that week, I think the Falcons would get the victory, which then sets them up in the NFC Championship once again as they visit the Eagles. Unfortunately, with Favre, I still don't think it's going to make a difference. I think the Eagles would dominate and win, and the Super Bowl matchup still remains the same. So now we head into a very important draft as well, 2005, as there's one player we have to keep an eye on, Aaron Rodgers. Now, of course, remember, he would be drafted by the Packers to be his successor to Favre. But remember, the Packers now have Pennington, and they don't have any need to draft him. So then, of course, where would Aaron Rodgers go in this situation? I couldn't really find anything afterwards if the Packers didn't draft him where he could go. So I decided to go back to what I always do, fill in a hole at QB. And after looking at it, there was really only one reasonable option. The Falcons. Yes, Aaron Rodgers, in this theory, would once again back up Favre to be as a future successor with the Falcons. As can't really think of any other team afterwards, and the Falcons would, I think, with the updated draft order, will be soon behind the Packers. So this will be a perfect moment for them to get their future successor. So yeah, can't wait to see when Aaron Rodgers begins, possibly. So we go into 2005, and the Falcons are struggling as Favre has not played really good, and they regress to 7-9, their first losing season since 2000. The Packers, meanwhile, regress massively once again as Pennington plays horribly and injured as they regress to 4-12. The Jets with Vic once again do not improve as they finish 6-10 once again. Meanwhile, for the Giants with Big Ben, they play good, but they only improve to 9-7. And the Steelers with Phillip Rivers plays good, but unfortunately regresses from their 15-1 high as they go down to 12-4. And here is the updated standings in 2005. In the AFC, the Steelers now have the 3rd seed, the Bengals fall to the 5th seed, and the Chiefs make the playoffs as the 6th seed. And the NFC, it's the Redskins that make the playoffs. Move up to the 4th seed, And the Panthers stay the same, and the Vikings make the playoffs as the 6th seed. However, in the end, the exact same, nothing changes. And with Big Ben, Phillip Rivers now playing, the Steelers would win the Super Bowl even more convincingly. So we're now in 2006, as Favre and the Falcons, he still is not really playing well, and that shows up, unfortunately, as the Falcons continue to regress as they fall to 6-10. Meanwhile, the Packers, with Pennington, once again, continue to struggle as they only improve to 5-11. For the first time in years, though, the Jets with Vic actually have a good season as they finished 8-8, their first non-losing season in 4 years. Now with the Giants with Big Ben, he plays horribly, remember, so they've regressed to 7-9. And the Chargers, their first year with Eli, he plays worse than Phillip Rivers. But don't forget, they mostly relied on LT, so it won't matter as they improve to 11-5. And the Steelers with Phillip Rivers would play so much better as they go, and same again, 12-4. So in the updated 2006 standings, in the AFC, the Ravens now have the number 1 seed as the Patriots move up to the 2nd seed. The Chargers fall down to the 4th seed. The Steelers make the playoffs as the 5th seed, and the Bengals make the playoffs as the 6th seed. And the NFC, meanwhile, the Eagles move up to the 2nd seed. The Seahawks move up to the 3rd seed. The Panthers make the playoffs as the 4th seed. The Saints fall down to the 5th seed, and the Cowboys fall to the 6th seed. However, once again, I don't think the Super Bowl outcome would change whatever. So with that, we're now heading into the final part, 2007, the last year before we possibly could see Favre retiring and all that. And of course, despite 2 more conference championships, the Falcons have still not won or even made a Super Bowl with Favre. Meanwhile, the Packers have now made 3 Super Bowls and won 2, which is more than with Favre. Quite impressive to say the least. But we'll see. With 4 years left before he fully retires, could maybe the next 4 years finally be the time where he gets a title and with the Falcons? We'll have to find out. So, see you guys next time for part 4 and the finale of this series.